Hello, Jane community. Welcome to our ambassador office hours. Today, we'll be discussing ending the professional relationship and how to navigate challenging patients. I am Jen Drummond. I'm the CEO and founder of Hummingbird Clinical Consulting, and I am filling in for my fellow Jane Ambassador, Kendall, today. And we have Roxanne with us. Hi, Roxanne. How are you?
Good morning. I am well. Good morning. Good morning. Hello, everyone. It is so lovely to be here. My name is Roxanne Francis, and I am the founder and CEO of Francis Psychotherapy and Consulting. We are a psychotherapy clinic group practice in Ontario, Canada, and we see clients in person and virtually, and I support other practitioners as they're building their practice as well.
Thank you so much for sharing. We had just an overwhelming response of questions for today's session. So I'm just going to dig right into our first question that we had from registrants, which is how we deal with clients that overbook, late cancel, or no show. So I'd love your perspective on that.
Yeah. Um, so a lot of behaviors come from, and so I'm a mental health practitioner. So a lot of the things that I talk about will speak specifically to mental health clients, but we'll try to generalize as well. Quite often, people who overbook are people who are very anxious about what's going on in their situation. You
Yeah.
know, they are struggling so much and they finally find a practitioner that they think that they can trust and they just book a whole bunch of sessions in, right? Whether it's a whole bunch for the year or for the next 6 months, or they book a number of times throughout the week. I think when you have your meeting with them, when you meet with them for the first time or maybe the second time, you need to have a conversation about
Mhm.
that, right? Can you help me understand how it is that you have come to book so many sessions over this length of time or so many sessions in such a short period of time? And then it's really important to just talk to them about what treatment can look like and how it's more advantageous to book within a certain span or
Yeah.
a certain kind of regularity. But I think that multiple booking or overbooking really speaks to how much people are struggling and how they are so relieved to finally find someone who can help them. So give me all the things as much as possible, as soon as possible, right? And you just have to have a conversation with them about expectation. Now, when it comes to late cancellations and no show, again, I think a lot of things can be resolved with conversation.
Yeah.
First of all, what does your client agreement look like, right?
Mhm.
What does it say in terms of late cancellation and no show? On our forms, we get people to initial where it says, this is the consequence for late cancellation, and this is the consequence for no show. Because usually people tend to gloss over things when they just want to get to the bottom and sign. But if
Right.
there's a clause where they have to initial, then they usually read that more carefully and then
Mhm.
have a conversation with them after, after the first no show or after the first late cancellation, just remind them of the policy so that it
Yeah.
doesn't become an issue.
Right. And do you find that when your team or even the provider demonstrates the value behind the care or the recommendations of care that the either the retention or the no-show rates lower?
Yeah.
Retention goes
Yeah.
higher, no-show goes
Retention
lower.
goes higher. Yeah. And no show goes lower. Sometimes, when you have a conversation, people might be open enough to share with you what's actually going on for them that actually has caused these no shows. There is something going on in the life. Maybe there is an ailing family member or something
Yeah.
that becomes unpredictable. But have a conversation with them about how much that impacts their care and
Right.
the support that you can provide and let's come to an understanding, right? Let's see how we can work this through together, right?
Right.
Because people have lives and there's things going on. But the more that they understand how it impacts the work and how it impacts the support that they can get, the more likely they are to actually show up on time.
Absolutely. And you're building a relationship through those policies,
Exactly.
fairness.
100%. Exactly.
Another question we got was around building strong policies and procedures and
Hmm.
empowering your practice to effectively deal with these types of behaviors can be absolutely paramount in stopping the occurrences from actually happening. So,
Hmm.
What exactly have you included in your policies and where have you shared them with your clients? And then lastly, how are you effectively making sure that your new and current patients are being respectful of your time?
Oh gosh. Okay, so policies. I can go back to things like no show, late cancellation, privacy.
Yeah.
We have conversation about those policies. There are things like, there is financial cost to missing a session,
Yeah.
right? Because again, that's a spot that could have been filled by another client. All of our clinicians have calendars that they have to uphold. Everybody's time is valuable, right?
Mhm.
And so, sometimes we have people who will say, well, I have insurance. Can I just bill me for that? And the insurance company will cover it. But, where I live, most insurance companies don't cover a cost that you have, a cost for the session that you have missed. And
Right.
so that will come out of pocket for people. And so, once they realize that there is financial cost to that, then that will likely go down. And again, the conversation. The other thing that's important is that you actually uphold the policy. There's no point in putting a policy in place, putting some kind of consequence in place, and then someone showing up and then you're like, oh, let's just let it slide for this first, second, third, fourth time. Then people will not respect your time.
Mhm.
They will not respect you as a practice owner, as a practitioner. And so it's really important. And the other thing too is that you are modeling what healthy boundaries look like.
Yeah.
Sometimes people don't have someone to model that for them, so that's important. Um, what was the other question again? I lost the I lost
No,
the second part.
we're definitely going right down that path of just being respectful of your time and what that means as far as setting a boundary within your
Yeah,
practice, and maybe they don't have those type of boundaries in their personal life.
exactly, exactly. And so it's really important to just hold that in place. Sometimes, even if people are new to the practice, just having a conversation with them, saying this is what the policy is, and when you don't show up in this way, this is how it impacts all of us.
Yes.
Hold, keeping your word and holding to those boundaries and those policies so that people realize that rules are in place for a reason, right?
Mhm.
It's so interesting that many places we go and we adhere to the rules and we adhere to the consequences, but when it comes to practitioners, sometimes people don't want to do that, and so it's really important that we put those boundaries in place and we hold to them.
Absolutely. And are there specific areas within your practice that you will highlight these policies?
um so we send the when people sign up, to become clients,
Yeah.
they sign the policies online, and then when the clinician sits with them for the very first time, we'll go over confidentiality, we'll go over who gets to see the file, we'll go over limits to confidentiality, and we'll go over um, no show and missed appointments, and
Mhm.
just verify that they understand what this means. A long time ago when I first started in this field, I remember going over informed consent with a client at the very beginning. She just, glanced over everything and signed it really quickly. And I decided to go over the main points with her. And she was so appreciative because she struggles with reading. And
Mhm.
so she just usually goes to the bottom and just signs. And she said, most people don't go over the main points with me. So I'm really
Yeah.
glad you did that.
So for you, it's a two-step process
Yeah.
where a lot of providers will have their consents or acknowledgments or agreements within their online intake forms, but you will actually sit
Hmm.
down with your new clients, new patients,
Hmm.
and review it so that they really have full comprehension.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. That's wonderful to
Hmm.
hear. And do you have these policies online or in any appointment reminders if you're doing text or email reminders?
Yes. So when we do text or email reminders, we just remind people about no show, late cancellation. If things come up, this is how you get in touch with us. And then we also have policies listed on our website.
Okay, that's great.
Hmm.
Um, and any sort of policies that you have in place for charging for the fee? So are you keeping credit cards on file or How is your process with your admin team to ensure that you are in fact charging for that, late cancellation fee or no-show fee?
Yeah, so we have, our system is not foolproof, but we do keep credit card on file. From time to time, you might have someone who maybe they've maxed out their card and the charge doesn't go through.
Yeah,
But we keep tabs of our accounts receivable as well. And we get in touch with people, we get them on the phone, we just have a conversation. And that is if the other pieces don't do what they're supposed to do. So we definitely keep credit card on file.
yeah,
People don't have to pay by credit card, but if they've missed their session, then they know that we're going to be charging the card. And if they've missed their session and the card doesn't work, we're going to be following up with a phone call. If they're avoiding phone calls, and we follow up with a letter. Like there's things in place so
yeah.
that that ensures that we do what we say that we're going to do.
Right. And there's guidelines for your team to be supported in the procedure. So there's no guesswork
Exactly.
then or gray area to have to decide
Exactly.
on a per case.
Exactly.
Basis.
Yeah, yeah. It's not like, I wonder what we should do with this client or with this client. It's all laid out. Yeah.
Yeah. And no shows and late cancellations, they can happen. We're all
They
human.
happen.
So as a practice owner, and we talked about it a little bit, but where do you draw the line and kind of remove that feeling of guilt for following your own policies and what's worked for
You
you?
know, I am I love people with all my heart. I love relationships, and we are really compassionate with our clients.
Mhm.
I also remind myself that I'm running a business.
Yeah.
And, when people agree and then they don't follow up on that agreement, then it means that our people can't get paid, right?
Mhm.
And I just remind myself that when my clients go to work, they expect a full paycheck. They can't, their workplace can't come to them and say, well, this and this happened, so you're only going to get 70% of your pay today, right?
Right.
All of the people on my team, they work really hard, they deserve to get paid. And so I have to park that guilt or whatever that feeling is around, maybe I shouldn't, I don't want to, they might get upset. I have to remind myself that this is a business, right?
Right.
And it's not just about bottom line, but bottom
Yeah.
line is important. Otherwise, I would only be running it myself, and I wouldn't be able to even pay myself adequately, right? So I have to remind myself of that, and take the emotion out of the process, and that's the reason why there are policies and procedures in place in
Mhm.
order to bypass the emotions that might come up.
Yeah. And, to view policies as fair for everyone and not
Yes,
punitive. We don't want to punish you for
exactly.
not
No,
showing up,
yeah,
trying to run a business, but also be in a place where you can help as many people as possible. And that's really what it's
exactly.
about.
Yeah.
Um, does your team use any scripts to be able to communicate these policies over the phone with clients? Or anything?
Um, Not the clinicians don't necessarily have a script, but my admin team, when they have to follow up with individuals, there is a script. When they're new, they follow the script, but they've done this so often now that it's kind of there.
Okay.
But it is there in terms of the points that they have to hit when they're having these conversations, especially if there is a new member of the admin team or a new member of the clinical team. They
Mhm.
do have they do have a script that they would normally follow. In terms of what it is right now, just around things like, we're so happy to have you on as a client. We noticed that you missed an appointment. We tried to run the card. It was unsuccessful. Wondering how you might be able to settle that. There isn't any sort of tell me what happened and maybe we can slide it. And we are human and we understand that things happen. Um, but we try not to let that override the job at hand.
Right. And it's nice that you're framing the policies in a way that you're still building that relationship. You do want them to continue care in this case.
Yes,
Point,
definitely.
not the end of the world, but also you're following those policies
Right.
for the health of your business as well.
Hmm.
Have any of your providers or clients that you've worked with, would they ever offer telemedicine or telehealth appointments for last minute changes or cancellations? Is that something that you've considered or seen in your world?
That's not something that I have necessarily, it's not something that we've done.
Mhm.
I'm familiar with a couple of people who do offer that, and that sometimes works for people. If
Yeah.
there are members on their team who just happen to be available and there's opportunity to take advantage of last minute, then I actually think that's a really great idea. As it just turns out for our team and how schedules work out, we haven't been able to do that. But I think it's a really, really great way to accommodate people who may need last minute, or there is a need for last minute cancellation, because life is very, very fluid and it comes at you fast. And so,
Does.
yeah, it definitely, I can see how can definitely support.
I just bring up the point, when I was a clinician, no longer practicing, but I was a registered nutritionist, and I worked with a lot of new moms on
Mm-hmm.
postpartum health, nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
And that's tough to get out of the house with a baby.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they'd want to, and sometimes they wouldn't. And so I would sometimes get those late cancellations, but I'd almost buffer my schedule in a way that I could offer telehealth, um,
Mm.
just as a touch point, right? So it didn't, in my case, it didn't really count as a late cancellation because I could pivot,
Yes.
client appointment. But just it was something I was interested in your world, if that's something you've seen,
Yeah.
just to further accommodate people.
Well, I can totally understand the struggle with, maybe like a new mom or someone who has a schedule that's kind of in flux. A lot of the clinicians on our team do actually offer telemedicine, or online therapy.
Mhm.
Um, that's scheduled in, right? So we may not have the opportunity to get someone in at the very last second, because how our schedules, that may be the case for many of the practitioners here as well, but our schedules are booked up like weeks in advance. And so it's hard to pop someone in at the last second. But whenever, if it's possible, then we try to do that. But it's usually because our schedules are so filled in so far in advance.
Yeah. And in my case, it would be instead of taking that patient in person, that appointment type would just be changed to online.
Right, 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 right. Okay, I see
The
what you mean.
slot
Yes,
was
yes,
still the
yes.
same. Yeah, yeah. It
Mm-hmm,
was
mm-hmm.
just, you get a call 2 hours before their appointment. I can't come in. I'm so sorry. I
Right.
can't.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Um, Instead of canceling them, and if there's the ability, right? We're not practicing
Right,
physical medicine where we have to
right.
actually, touching the patient. But
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
just an aside of, is this a possibility in your
Yes,
practice of a way that you could pivot,
yes,
using Jane's features in order to accommodate that client, I guess.
totally. And I know that some people have, what do they call them? Cancellation lists. So if someone needs an appointment sooner rather than the next week or the next 2 weeks, and someone cancels, they might be able to fit them in sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's great. That's a great point. I'll jump to our next question because I think this
Yeah,
one's
yeah.
interesting. But one of them was, what safety protocols and training does your practice implement to handle challenging patient situations?
Safety protocol. So for those of us who are in the office, not all of us are in person, but for those of us who are in the office, we try not to have just one clinician in the office at any given time.
Mhm.
Just, things can go sideways.
Yeah.
It rarely happens, but we also have panic buttons. We have a security system in the space, which happens to be very responsive. And so we have panic buttons for anyone who's in the office. After, where I live at 5 o'clock, it's dark now. So we actually lock the door after 5 o'clock, and clients know that when they arrive, they can just text us or call us and let them know that we're here. Let us know that they're here.
Mhm.
We grab the door and let them in. Um, we check in with each other in between sessions when we're in the building. In terms of trainings, we've had a couple of not formal official trainings, but we have our team meetings and we get together and we talk about what needs to happen, things that need to be changed, how we feel supported, how we feel safe, um, just to make sure that there are no, just to mitigate any challenges that might crop up. From time to time, you might have a client who might get, I don't know, boisterous, and we remind them that, we have to speak to each other respectfully,
Mhm.
that they're not the only one in the space, in the office. They have to keep their tone at a reasonable level. Um, and if they're having trouble regulating, then we can certainly offer them another time to come into the session. We try to frame that in a way that doesn't necessarily uh, that isn't punitive, right? Like, calm down, we try to, if you're having trouble
Sure.
regulating,
Yeah.
maybe now is not the best time for the session. Maybe you want to, go home or go grab a glass of water and regroup, and then we can talk about what the next session can look like. And then before the next session, we have a conversation around, um, you know, why this happened, or you were triggered in this way, and whether or not this kind of behavior is respectful, right?
Right. So you mentioned having team meetings. Are you noting anything on patient files or client files if there was an incident, just to,
Yes.
okay, great, just to, I guess,
Yeah,
warn or even
definitely.
just educate the
Yes.
members?
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, for sure.
And then either have you done this in your practice, or would you find value from the team being trained or even having a workshop on emotional intelligence or tools for de-escalating?
I think definitely tools for de-escalating. Now that we're talking, I'm just making a mental note. We given the work that we do, the emotional intelligence part is almost kind of built in for all of us. Because it's a mental health practice, right? But in terms of tools for de-escalating and managing sort of almost like a critical incident situation,
Right.
I think definitely this de-escalation piece is something that I should actually look into. I would encourage all of us to
Yeah.
look into that, because people get, their emotions activated for multiple reasons.
Mm.
Um, that is definitely something that um, we talk about it at length with our team when it comes to things like couple therapy, and family work, because
Yeah.
that's usually when, people get activated. Usually we might even be having a challenging discussion in a one-on-one setting with an individual client, but they're usually able to regulate. We help them regulate. But when it comes to a family dynamic or couple dynamic,
Mhm.
sometimes, people get their emotions activated really significantly, and so the de-escalation piece is important.
Yeah, and a huge difference between a provider having these skills and having gone to school for this, and then
Hmm.
an team that may not have
Yes.
all of the awareness and
Yes.
educational background that would require to have that sort of human interaction.
Yes.
And most of the
Yes.
time, they're the ones dealing with the aggravation because,
Yes. Exactly. Exactly. One of the things that maybe I should have mentioned this, our admin team, and I would recommend this for anyone's admin team. We are certified in mental health first aid.
okay.
And so they might not have a psychotherapy background, but they have the basics, right? Things to look out for, just understanding trauma, what it looks like when someone's really triggered or activated in any way, needing to call 911, that kind of stuff, right? So I think that's really important for anyone who's doing frontline work.
Absolutely. That's really valuable information. And
Hmm.
that talks to the training of your team and how they're servicing your patient roster and that
Yeah,
specific demographic. So thank you for sharing that.
you're welcome.
Anything else you want to add before I move on to our next question?
Um, No, I think that's
We covered it.
we're good with that one.
All right, so we're going to talk about needing to potentially end that patient relationship. So, what are
Mm,
some things that come to mind when it comes to ending that patient relationship, and maybe some of the either procedures through your governing board to release that patient, or even just talk about if you're even allowed to stop care, just in your context of running your practice?
Yeah, so yes, we are allowed to stop care. You know, files close, so to speak, for multiple reasons.
Yeah.
Sometimes patients move away and you just never hear from them again.
Mhm.
Um, you know, I always think that having a proper sort of ending of the client relationship is really important. It really helps people move on. It helps
Mhm.
people have a sense of accomplishment, have a sense of wrapping up this end of their journey with you. Um, it's really crucial, particularly again as we are, you know, for mental health practitioners at least, and other clinicians, right? We're mirroring how to live life, right? And so for many people, they've had uh, situations of abandonment or people really important to them who have left quite suddenly. It's really, really important to close the relationship well.
Mhm.
If you are only working with um, a patient or a client for a certain number of sessions, I like to say that the ending starts from the beginning. And so if you only have 12 sessions, then you're going to as you're doing your work, you'll say, okay, so this is session one, we've got 11 left. So
Yeah.
they don't just wake up one day and go, oh no, I only have one left. And I really enjoy working with my practitioner. And now I feel awful, right? So you're continually winding down as you do the work so that people are not caught off guard. Um, at the end of working with the client, we do the final paperwork, and in the Jane system, you can mark discharge.
Mhm.
We create a final clinic note. If for whatever reasons people need to come back for more work, they're more than welcome to come back. We'll just have to start. They'll have to sign a new um, client agreement. We'll do a new intake because things might have changed, but then we're able to reopen the file. But
Mhm.
definitely, it's important to start with the end in mind, right? You start with a goal.
Right.
Uh, have we gotten to this goal? Um, Sometimes you get to the goal and the patient or client still wants to work with you, right? And then we need to talk about that as well. We need to talk about, okay, what does that mean? Is there actually an issue here that needs to be resolved? Because we're not going to sit here and have scones and coffee, right? There's a
Nice.
reason that we're meeting. There's a reason that we're meeting, and we want to be able to honor that as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just think it's important to have uh, responsible, um, responsible and very thought through endings with our clients so that
Mhm.
they can, wrap things up and sort of move on to the next thing of their life.
Right. What about a scenario where the client or patient is being discharged due to behavior? So either aggressive
Hmm.
behavior or significant amount of late cancellations or no-shows. Do you
Hmm.
have any words of advice for that scenario?
Yeah, I would say don't feel bad or guilty for discharging this client. We are people, and our clients are people, our patients are people with complex lives. And sometimes they reach out to us with the intention of doing this work, but
Mhm.
sometimes it's just not the right time.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's all kinds of upheaval going on in their homes. Sometimes the work situation is really toxic. Sometimes their mental health is it looms quite significantly. And so
Mhm.
despite their best effort, this might not be the best time. And so you can even use that language.
Yeah.
We've noticed over the past number of sessions or number of appointments that these things have been happening repeatedly, and it might seem like now might not be the best time for you to continue with care, and that's quite okay. We're going to discharge you for now, and if things clear up or get better, you're more than welcome to come by later. Or you may even say, I refer you to another colleague, or this might not be the best uh, service, right? So I think that to have that communication with your with the patient, with the client, And we're not just checking them out,
Yeah.
right? Even if they are not showing up, or even if they're canceling on a regular basis, or even if they're being disrespectful, you can
Mhm.
say, you know, this is not the kind of thing that we do here. Maybe now is not a good time for you, or we
Right.
might not even be the best fit. Here are some other practitioners in the community who might work better for you.
And in your experience in your practice, do you have to provide a direct referral to
No,
another?
you don't have to. You don't have to provide a direct referral. I just think it's kind.
Mhm.
Sometimes they might not be the best fit, but sometimes people have looked high and low before they found you and they don't know where else to turn. And so I just think it's kind to offer people two or three other names in the community that they might reach out to and see what's possible.
Right. And to also recognize that sometimes provider-patient relationships are not advantageous in, this specific practice, and maybe they would be
Exactly.
suited for another provider. That's just
100%.
human interaction.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing
I
to feel
agree.
about. Thank you for that. That's really
Yeah,
valuable.
no worries.
Or anything else you want to add about this topic?
Closures are inevitable, right? And sometimes we grow an affinity for our clients, so we might not want to uh, we might be up in our feelings about clients moving on, but that's just a part of life, and you just have to allow to for that to end in order for another client relationship to begin. I work with some students in the grad program here, and we were recently talking about endings and closure. And one of my students said something very profound. They said, closure is an internal process. It's not something that someone can give to you. And
Mhm.
so we have to remember that as people are moving on, that we have to remind ourselves that it's okay to close up. It's okay to say goodbye and move on.
Mhm. That's valuable. I'm sure a lot of people will resonate with that.
Mm,
It's difficult to say goodbye, and I assume in the individuals that you're helping, there may be some sort of attachment as well, but it's important to, have that clear boundary, right?
right, right.
Okay, well, I just want to acknowledge that we had so many thoughtful questions for this session. And I think it really shows just the types of questions and conversations we should be having on this topic in health and wellness,
Mhm.
and how important it is. So, we may not be able to get to all of our listeners' questions, but I'm going to go through a couple of them and see what we can answer in the time we have left.
Mhm.
Um, We've talked about a lot of these. This is a good one. This is about overdue payments. So it says, how do
Mhm.
you handle overdue payments from a patient who was dismissed from the practice due to their behavior?
Um, you know, this might sound really simple and, you know, communicate with them.
Yeah.
Phone, email, snail mail, despite, having to um, discharge or end the session early or whatever it is, whatever the ending had looked like,
Mhm.
there's an amount owing. And so just like any other service, right? If there's an amount owing, then the person needs to send payment and offer them multiple ways by which they'd like to send payment. However it is that you accept payment, offer them all of those opportunities and give them a date by which you need to receive the payment.
Mhm.
Um, and keep track of that. Have yourself or your team pay attention to whether or not they've made the payment and follow up. And however you manage delinquent payments, then you need to have a policy or practice in place for
Yeah.
managing payments when they're more than a certain number of days past due. But go after
Right.
that.
Yeah. And do you see either in your practice or colleagues' practices where they will go to a collections agency to retrieve a
Yes.
portion of the payment? Yeah. And
Yes.
not
Yeah.
to be afraid of doing that. You did the work, right? Um,
Exactly.
And it's important for your admin team to have the tools and, procedures to follow of, if we didn't receive payment up until this date, like this is,
Yes.
when we go to collections.
Yeah.
And have, that communication or even that warning to that client that if the payment's not received by this date, then they will in fact end up in collections, which is
Right.
unfortunate, but at
Which is
least.
unfortunate. Yeah. Yeah. And when we reach out to people, if they are, one of the things that we ask them when we do send them an email or a letter is, if you are having difficulty making the payment, please contact our office and we can set up a payment arrangement. Because I know life gets dicey sometimes, and it's not always people's intention to avoid paying you, right?
Right.
Sometimes they just have to make a choice between putting food on the table and making this payment. And so we let people know, if this is a challenge, please let us know and we can try to meet you halfway. But for
Yeah.
people who are just you know unresponsive, or um avoidant or whatever, then yeah, I it's definitely part of our practice anyway. We use a collection service and we go after a portion of that money.
Yeah. That's good to know. I like this next question. So it says, how to ensure that our policies and consents or intake forms are compliant and legal within our state.
Hmm. So I would imagine that wherever you are, that you have a governing body for the work that you do,
Yeah.
right? So I would get in touch with the governing body, find out what the policies are, find out what where I live, our governing body has a legal arm attached to it. And
Mhm.
so, as a part of our dues, we can get a lawyer to take a look at our policies and our procedures to ensure that they're actually legal. So I would encourage practitioners wherever you live to get in touch with your governing body if there are lawyers associated, to try to make sure that you're in good standing where
Yes.
your policies and procedures are.
Yeah. And that you're protecting yourself and your practice too, right?
Exactly,
Right.
exactly.
That's a good tip. Let's look here. Okay, I really like this one. We'll talk about this one.
Yeah.
But what are doctor-centered responsibilities or provider-centered responsibilities versus front desk-centered responsibilities when dealing with problem patients?
Hmm. That's a good question. Okay,
Good.
so let me see if we can brainstorm this. So, front desk, I would believe, is responsible for, people as they're coming in, any forms that might need to be signed in person or virtually,
Yep.
um, you know, paying of dues or going after those dues. Um, let's see what else. Now, in terms of uh, doctor or provider responsibility, I know for me, I'm specifically responsible for the oversight of what goes on. Um, People when they're actually in the office getting treatment or doing the work. Um, Decisions that go beyond admin are things like, you know, well, we have policies in place now, but before we used to have some of these policies in place, like, what do I do if that, I've reached out to this person and they haven't paid, right?
Yeah.
I can't expect my admin staff to make a decision over something that's bigger than their scope, right? Um, you know, I think admin is more like kind of like client care, right? Making sure that the client is comfortable or taken care of when they're getting in touch with the company, when they're getting in touch with the organization or with the clinic or with the office. In terms
Mhm.
of treatment, how treatment is doled out, that's the clinician's or the provider's responsibility. Let's see.
It's helpful to know too where to make that clear boundary for your front desk staff as well.
Yes.
Office manager or your executive assistant, whoever you have in your practice that's supporting the day-to-day, they are that
Yes.
clear boundary between the patient and the
Yes.
provider when it comes to all things
Yes.
booking, finance,
Yes.
Whatever it
Exactly.
may be. So the doctor, the provider is really here for patient care. They're here to make their
Yes.
recommendations. They're here to, make that follow up depending on what the scope is for
Right.
that
All the
individual,
clinical things. Yeah.
all the clinical things. But whoever is the owner of the practice, so the doctor, the provider, it's up to them to empower their front desk team to have the
In order
answers
to
on
do
how to handle them. Um, and to
100%.
delineate that, right? Because it's uncomfortable for a doctor to be in a situation where they need to reprimand. You don't want that.
Yes, you don't want that. It messes with the relationship,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. So I think just having that delineation between job roles and ensuring that the doctor is still in that nurturing position with their patient and that they're not
Yeah.
having to bring down the hammer of, you were late or you have a amount owing or whatever it may be, like really empower the front desk team to have the tools
Yes.
resources
Yes.
necessary to handle perhaps a problem client or patient, so that when you're in your sessions, it's really about them and the relationship that you're cultivating with the patient.
Yes. If not, what can happen is that the patient can then try to circumvent the admin staff by going to the provider saying, "Hey, I know that I was late for such and such, but can you just make this, this allowance for me this one time?" Or, and it really is the responsibility of the admin team.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Okay, we got a question that came through our chat. So let me quickly answer
Mhm.
this. This will be our last one, but it says, how do you handle a patient or a client that perpetually cancels at the 49-hour mark? They aren't technically canceling late, but are still disrupting your schedule. That's a really good one.
I think that requires a conversation,
Yeah.
right? That requires a conversation, um, a sit down saying, let's listen. I know that you're canceling right before the time that we've allotted, but it's here is how it's disrupt. I think really just being clear. Here is how this is creating disruption for our team.
Yeah.
And this isn't something that's happened once. This is something that's happened five, six, seven times. We would much prefer if you need to cancel that you cancel within this time, in order to give us enough time to do what we need to do. I think sometimes patients just don't understand how it disrupts things on the back end. And I think a little communication can go a very long way.
I agree. Absolutely. Well, we have come to the end of our questions, and I want to thank
Wow,
you
that was
for being
fast.
with us today. It did go fast, but we're having so much fun helping others.
Yes.
I'd love to give you the opportunity just to add anything that we maybe didn't talk about, just in this, this last little moment that we have together.
Yeah, what I will say is that running a clinic is, or, running a practice, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. And maybe you went to school for, you know, doing the provider work or doing the clinical work, and here you are running a practice, making decisions about other things that you did not get any training on, and you might feel like, um, you're in the dark sometimes. I'm so glad that Jane is doing this. It gives people the opportunity to recognize, one, they're not alone. You're not crazy because you're getting swamped by all of the administrative things that you need to take care of. Um, and again, I'm so glad that Jamie is doing this because the answer lies in community,
Mhm.
right? If we reach across the table and connect with each other, uh, even connecting with people outside of your discipline, we're still running practices, we're still running clinics, whether you are a dietitian or a physio or a mental health care provider. We are all navigating similar waters. So don't feel like, you know, you're a mess, or you're not doing it well. Just, reach across the table and say, "Hey, how'd you do that?"
Yeah.
And get the support that you need.
Because it can feel lonely when you're running your own.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a great point
Totally.
to reach out to your greater community for support. Because
Mm-hmm.
we're all just trying to help people, right?
Right, right.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, I will thank you again for today. We will see everybody next month on December 2nd, where I will be the guest speaker with Kendall this time. We will be
It'll be
talking
so
about
good.
all things stress management and strategies for our listeners and their teams to overcome burnout. So
Hmm.
this way, everybody can enter the new year feeling excited and prepared to collaborate effectively as well as help more clients. So thanks again for being here and bye to our Jane community. I hope everyone has a great start to their week.